The doors to the courtroom creaked open, and slowly, almost silently, an old man stepped in. His wrists were bound in cuffs, and his face, carved deep with lines of time and pain, was tilted downward. Every step he took seemed heavy, like he was carrying more than chains. "State your name," the court clerk asked, voice firm but routine. The man looked up just slightly, enough for his voice to escape. It trembled, soft, low, tired. "Elias Carter, Staff Sergeant, United States Marines." You could have heard a pin drop. No one, not a single soul in that courtroom, had the faintest clue what was about to be unearthed. The judge, a woman in her late 40s with composed grace, flipped through the case file. Just another morning, just another name, until suddenly her hand paused. Her breath caught. That name, Elias Carter. It didn't belong to just any defendant. It belonged to the Marine who had once, long ago, carried her brother from a firefight in Fallujah and then disappeared into the silence of war. Honor never fades. Not with time. Not with poverty. If you believe that, then this story is for you. Elias Carter, 69 years old, sat slouched on the cold courtroom bench. His frame was swallowed by an old, tattered military coat, 2 sizes too large. Once, he wore dress blues, medals gleaming on his chest. But under today's sterile courtroom lights, all that remained were deep facial lines, etched from grief, loss, and years of invisible battles. Time had changed the uniform. Once polished and proud, now replaced by second-hand shelter clothes. But the man beneath? Still the same Marine. Case 47B, the bailiff called. City of Newbridge versus Elias Carter. Charges? Disturbing the peace. Trespassing. Resisting arrest. Elias rose with effort. His body stiff, aching from time, from war, from wounds both seen and buried deep. Vietnam first, then Iraq. Scars from 2 wars, carried in silence for decades. The prosecutor, young and sharply dressed, stood up. His voice, clear, practiced, almost too clean. "Mr. Carter has been warned repeatedly," he said, "about loitering behind the Jefferson Street Cafe." The cafe owner filed multiple complaints, 3 this month alone. But what he didn't mention, what his words left out, was far more important. Elias didn't beg. He never asked anyone for anything. He just sat, curled near the alley's vent, trying to stay warm, while winter winds bit into his bones. Next came the officer's testimony. Found him behind the cafe at 11:45 p.m. He refused to vacate when ordered. But that wasn't the truth, not really. Elias hadn't refused. He had asked, gently, quietly, if he could have 5 more minutes to finish a sandwich. A kind cook had slipped it to him through the back door. But no one listened back then. And no one seemed to be listening now. "Your Honor," the prosecutor pushed forward, "this is his 3rd citation this year. We're recommending 30 days of community service and a no trespass order for the downtown district." That order, on paper just a formality, would mean Elias couldn't go to the 4th Street shelter anymore. The only warm place he had left. He'd be barred from the church meals, cut off from the soup lines, left outside in the brutal cold during the worst stretch of winter. Judge Olivia Parker finally addressed him. "Mr. Carter, do you have legal representation today?" He shook his head. His court-appointed defender had been pulled away last minute, another emergency in another courtroom. "Would you like to speak on your own behalf?" she asked, eyes peering gently over her glasses. Elias cleared his throat. His voice, rough, honest. "No excuses, ma'am. Just needed to stay warm." "Why that location?" she asked, tone still unreadable, but something softer now behind her words. He hesitated. "Jimmy the cook, he sometimes leaves food. I've known him since he was a boy. His dad served with me. Desert Storm." "And your service?" she asked again, this time breaking away from her usual courtroom protocol. Elias slowly stood straighter. There it was again, that hint of pride. "United States Marine Corps, ma'am. 1975 to 1995. Staff Sergeant. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. Iraq." The room seemed to pause. The air shifted. The words landed like anchors. The judge's pen paused again. She made a subtle mark on the file, then continued reading. Something in that file, something buried deep, stopped her again. Before she could speak, the courtroom doors suddenly swung open. A sharply dressed man in a navy suit entered with determination, briefcase in hand. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "Alexander Ross. I've just been retained to represent Mr. Carter. My apologies for the late arrival." Elias blinked in confusion. He hadn't called a lawyer. Couldn't afford one. Not someone wearing cufflinks and Italian leather shoes. "This is highly unusual," Judge Parker said, watching closely. The court was not notified of any new counsel. "It was a last-minute development," Ross replied smoothly. "I respectfully request a brief recess to consult with my client." The judge stared at them both, her expression unreadable. "This court will recess for 15 minutes, she finally said, and stepped into her chambers. Elias leaned toward the man beside him. I can't pay you," he murmured. Ross smiled gently. "You won't need to. My firm, Williams, Ross, and Parker, we're taking your case pro bono." The name caught Elias's attention. "Parker?" he asked. "Like the judge?" Ross nodded. "Exactly like the judge." Inside her private chambers, Judge Olivia Parker took off her glasses, her hands unsteady. 2 decades on the bench had taught her how to control a courtroom, but nothing had prepared her for this. "It can't be him," she whispered to herself. But every detail lined up. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a weathered photograph. A younger her, beaming beside her brother, Lieutenant Jack Parker. He was in full Marine dress uniform. His arm was slung around her shoulder, pride and joy shining in both of their faces. Beside the photo was the final letter she'd ever received from him. From Iraq. In it, he described a hellish night outside Fallujah. A brutal ambush. The unit was trapped. But then, out of nowhere, came a Marine. "Staff Sergeant Quinn," he had written. "He ran straight into the gunfire. Dragged me out. Covered us as we pulled out the injured. If not for him, none of us would have made it." 2 weeks later, Jack was killed by an IED. At the funeral, she remembered a fellow Marine approaching her. "Your brother saved my life," he said. "I was the one he carried." He never finished the sentence. He didn't have to. She never forgot his name. Mason Quinn. She had searched for him for years. The military said he'd been redeployed. Then discharged. PTSD. Brain injury. Gone. Until today. A knock pulled her from the past. Ross stood there, face somber. "Olivia, what's going on?" He was more than a lawyer. Her late husband's former partner. A lifelong friend. "It's him, Alex," she said, holding up the photo. "The Marine who saved Jack. The man I've been searching for all these years is sitting in my courtroom right now." Ross's face changed. "The homeless veteran in court today? That's him." She nodded slowly. "It's Elias Carter," she said. "Same unit. Same date. Same silver star. Same story Jack told in his last letter."